Hello and good evening and welcome to the best of TIR. This is the top 10 most viewed shows of the year. Once again, the number one show this year was a clip of Norm Finkelstein talking about Gooning. Yep. It really makes you wonder where Gooning sits in the important stories of 2025. That a passing comment that man made. I believe he says in the clip, and now everyone's going to go watch it again, and no one ever gives us credit for doing the interview that brought out the Gooning comment. Was it Adam Friedland? Nope. Couldn't get it out of him. No one. Was it Brianna Joy Gray? Nope. Katie Halper? Nuh-uh. It's right here on TIR. This is where you get the good Gooning content. I don't know what that means, but I said it. But what he had said was he felt that people that enjoyed, I shouldn't say enjoyed, but that were into this were ripe for fascism. And at the time, we were like, what? Now I'm like, you might be on something. That being said, this show was about Trump and his war against bureaucrats and how his administration pretty much did everything in their power to lay waste to a lot of bureaucratic power that was holding him up in Trump's first time around. So the second time around, as Kuba predicted, he was going to lay waste to a certain divisions within the government that wouldn't gunk up the wheels of authoritarian progress. Also, there's people within those positions that kind of pay more fealty to the position itself than to the person in office. So in wanting an office full of loyalists, maybe the first thing to do is get rid of the bureaucrats. But surprisingly, that was one of the top 10 shows. I was shocked. I never know the shows that people are going to dig. I have to say, some of the favorite shows I did, none of them were in the top 10. But that's just me. But look, we're going to be doing these all for the next 2 weeks. We're going to be going through the top 10 episodes. Also, if you are wanting to be a patron and you're like, I don't know, maybe. Well, we're giving away 20 complimentary patron memberships for 3 months. So go to patreon.com/BitterLakePresents. Wherever you're watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description to become a patron, a trial member patronage. There's also some gift year-long memberships that some very good patrons paid for. So anyone that doesn't have the financial means to become a patron, there are some year-long memberships available. So go to patreon.com/BitterLakePresents. Again, wherever you're watching or listening, there's a link in the description. If you have a hard time trying to find it, just email me, booking@thisisrevolutionpodcast.com. That comes directly to me, and I will be more than happy to send you that complimentary patron membership. Now, with all that out of the way, on to the show. Peace. I'm trying not to read the comments because my screen is lower than the sight line of my camera. but I peeked out of the corner of my eye before I started. And as you can see, I am not on location today. I'm in the normal TIR studio, my bedroom. And you guys are already telling some very funny jokes. To listen to this show is one thing, but to watch it live with the chat is an entirely different experience that I suggest you try. You have to try to make it. Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, here for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please, wherever you will be listening to this later or listening to this now, please hit like, subscribe. It's a passive gesture that goes a long way. If you are a returning listener, subscriber, or one of our very valued patrons, fuck yeah. So glad to have you here again. Also, I want to send a fat ass birthday shout to a man that's been on the show a few times, a man that has hosted a big chunk of the TIR crew, Daniel Tutt. Happy birthday, Daniel Tutt. I can't look down because when I look down, the insanity that I see in the chat is insane. I know it'll taper off a little as the show goes on, but keep looking out of the corner of my eye. We are going to go to the champagne room tonight. I promise it'll be a lot of fun because the fun people that come with me in the champagne room are here on this show. A few of them will be joining for a little bit. If you would like access to that fun, if you want to go beyond the velvet rope and see what happens in the champagne room, there's only one way you can do that. Become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. You can have access to champagne rooms past and present. Join us for movie nights. Get the crisis papers for free. If you want to try it out, you can do that too. Yep. For 7 whole days, you too can join us in the patrons only champagne room. Wherever you are watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description. So you can click that link, become a patron, bam. You can try it out. Now, let's talk about Donald Trump and his battle against what he calls the deep state. When I hear someone speak about deep state, I envision clandestine government agencies engaged in covert operations, from spying on political dissidents to orchestrating coups in foreign nations to protect U.S. imperial interests. When Donald Trump uses the term deep state, however, he's not referencing shadowy operatives or espionage, but rather the approximately 2 million federal employees who, while often performing mundane tasks, are essential to the daily functioning of government. Trump, a self-stylized businessman president, embodies the literal interpretation of that role. Many of his supporters were drawn to his promise of applying business principles to government, a perspective that aligns with the frequent metaphor of the nation state as a business. Politicians often invoke this analogy in stump speeches, pledging to eliminate wasteful spending and maximize the return on taxpayer dollars. For Trump, this approach translates into an aggressive stance against the federal bureaucracy, which he views as bloated and insufficient. One of the starkest manifestations of this philosophy has been his push to overhaul the federal workforce. Trump has repeatedly clashed with public sector unions and proposed measures that would significantly curtail the protections and independence of civil servants. For instance, the December 2023 memo sought to freeze federal spending on loans and grants, a move that faced immediate backlash and forced a retreat by the White House. Such initiatives exemplified Trump's broader agenda to reshape the federal government into a leaner, more privatized entity, a vision that has drawn fierce resistance from unions, Democrats and some nonpartisan experts who warn of the long-term consequences. Today, we'll delve into Trump's war on the bureaucracy, examining the implications of his proposals and the countermeasures being taken to preserve the integrity and the independence of the federal workforce. To do that, we have maybe the best person to talk about bureaucracy, and that is everyone's favorite Imperial Democrat, Deep State Cuba. Cuba.
Yeah, I had to fill out so many disclosure forms to appear on this show.
Did you get that
They
video?
do not like you. Yeah,
Cuba, did you get that video I sent with the Death Star exploding, but it does it where you can see every facet of the Death Star exploding?
No.
You didn't see that?
I didn't see that. Was it like embedded in like lengthy conversation about obscure leftist personalities in the group? Because then I definitely missed it.
So after our secret conversation, I sent that and I tagged you on it because I wanted you to see that because it was actually really. I thought it was kind of cool. Maybe the rest of the guys on the show saw it. Coming all the way live from his secret lair in Southern California. Sometimes he's my neighbor. All the time he's my friend. He is Ben Burgess.
You know, you say that, but I just realized that it's been a minute since I've been on the main show. That's definitely a different intro video than I remember.
Is it?
I think so.
Oh, because you're not on the main show. Yeah.
There were some purges, like certain figures were rehabilitated, other figures fell from grace. You need to rotate the reds every once in a while. It can't always be vermilion.
We lost it. We had to change services. We
lost
for
the restream shift, yeah.
Yeah. And I asked Gene to make a new one, and he just said flat out no.
Yeah, well, that's Gene. Yeah, no, it's I am yeah, no, I do need to get back to Rosarito. It's been a frustrating couple of weekends of being stuck on the gringo side of the border where everything is much more expensive and the chilaquiles are only like 3/4 as good.
Right? And 4 times as expensive.
It's also true. Yeah.
There was something I forgot to tell you in the private chat that I will write. Well, I won't tell you till after the show, but it does involve chilaquiles.
Right, fair enough.
And last but not least, we call this the anchor leg, right? The strongest one of us all. Darth Derek.
The angriest one of us all, anyway.
That's why they're Darth Derek. That's your new your double D.
I'm double D now that I can't be white
Sean King.
Sean King,
since I have my hair's too long and I gained some weight. Like, yeah.
Well, it's also winter in Utah, so you have never been this pale.
That's also true, yeah.
When Cuba looks darker than
Twilight territory.
Yeah. Cuba, you've explained this before, but maybe you need to explain it succinctly for people one last time. When Trump talks of the deep state and wanting to get rid of it, what is he really talking about? And why does he hate these bureaucrats so much?
Well, every U.S. government agency, whether it's the Department of Defense, the Department of Transportation, parastate organizations like the USPS will have some federal employees in it. The Foreign Service at the State Department, for instance, the people who work at embassies, who work at consulates, who represent the United States internationally, all of those are federal bureaucrats. The people administering Pell Grants or Medicare or Medicaid, the people buying aircraft carriers from the private sector, because of course, even defense has been largely privatized. those are all members of the federal workforce. Indeed, every uniformed officer serving, officer or soldier, seaman, airman. Is it still men at the end of all of these?
Sea person.
Like, yeah. In any case, all military personnel are also part of the federal workforce, and that's the organization through which any kind of political, any state authority or state function operates. It's composed of people, and the individuals may not matter and can be easily replaced, but as a class, well, even at the individual level, there are the place of these white collar workers, essentially. The influence that they have has allowed them to protect themselves through unionization. The federal public sector unions are one of the few ones remaining. And through successive acts of Congress, the process by which that bureaucracy is staffed, their career progression, has all been regularized, standardized, and laid out. Now, over time, the civil service attracted a certain type of person, one which skewed more and more democratic in general. This varies agency by agency. For instance, DHS is generally very reactionary, but for instance, the Department of Education, the State Department, I'm not saying that they're leftists, but a lot of them are liberals. And there's also a collective esprit among civil servants. The very word civil servant, distinguishes them from regular office workers. And there are all of these ritualized commitments, oaths to the Constitution, that kind of thing, because you should be working for the interests of the nation state. So all of that resulted in a class of people, ones that were essential for the exercise of state power, working, not sharing the agenda of the president, who's nominally their boss. And when you look at it from that kind of perspective, in his first term, it was basically partly a labor action that derailed some of his plans. Some of it was personnel at the top, some of it was personnel across entire agencies, but you did have slow walking and anxiety about fulfilling his orders, right? Whether it was things like the Muslim ban, which also attracted legal action, but often by other PMC bureaucracies, sometimes state level governments. Now that Trump understands how a bureaucracy works and what the importance is of having cadres in all the right places, he's going after this entire class of federal employees, stripping them of job protections. There's going to be entire units and programs have been cut. Attempts at, including in ways that are designed to stop the flow of money to people outside of the government through the form of grants or aid. So that entire structure, the state apparatus, it's not spies, it's not just cloak and dagger supporting Israel, Mossad, CIA type stuff. The entire organization that supports the federal government governing is on the block and ripe for reengineering. That's the promise of the second Trump term.
How do you personally feel about that?
I'm very desensitized at this point. Like, I'm one of those guys who have seen way too many horror movies, so I can just sit through like some Saw style splatter gore and be like, that I don't think a femur breaks like that. And so, objectively, this is terrible. This is very, very bad. The people who ideologically, when you manage to establish a pipeline of personnel that are committed to your program into the government apparatus, well, now the entire power of the state is at the disposal of somebody who doesn't share your vision for the future, and somebody who may have interests that are deeply contrary to yours. There's no more bricks on this thing, right? There's no humanizing influence. The most dangerous periods, the most extreme periods in authoritarian countries, the Third Reich and Soviet Russia included, was when the party state had finally succeeded in removing all of the old bureaucrats and replacing them with the most committed ideologues. That's when you can really use state power to do crazy things. To a certain extent, what came before was a little bit of kabuki, where from the 70s onwards, or following the notion, the feeling of unity and solidarity of national mission provided by World War II and the Cold War, that helped solidify a particular kind of truce between political factions, where the state apparatus, although it needed to be, McCarthyism got rid of actual leftists, but what was permitted, what stayed behind, was this ideological space, which included center-left and center-right forms of American liberalism, and a willingness to play by rules, drawn up by this nominally neutral cadre of people whose loyalty is not to the political parties or to particular leaders, but to the state as a whole. And that politicization, that offered a certain kind of a resistance to political ideology and political programs that were beyond the pale. Then that began to break down, I think, in the 90s. But at this point, what started out as a leftward drift among people, basically college-educated Americans, that developed a certain respectability around the values of tolerance, multiculturalism, these kinds of things. The people who, made the world safe for wine moms. Now they're being replaced by Trump loyalists who are young.
Yeah.
That should be scary, right? Because the previous guys weren't harmless, but these guys are definitely harmful.
Derek Varn, you have something you wanted to add?
I'm not. Well, I mean, there's a couple problems that you have here. One is I would advise people to go read Robert Michel's Political Parties and Where the Iron Law of Oligarchy Comes From. And two, I would then advise you to read where he ended up and why he ended up there. So the Robert Michel came up with this critique of elites, and not just elites and like the bourgeoisie, that people who form groups have the first people who form the group do a capture, set the tone for the group. And
You okay?
And what happens when you do that is that even from just sincere commitment, form a coterie around themselves. This is a block to other people entering. This is where bureaucratic capture comes from. This led to this theory that was picked up by James Burnham, looking from the school, and the managerial elite. And what that led to was this idea that all the world's economies had gone through an entrepreneurial period and subsumed themselves to various different forces. And to do that, they had needed to deal with the complexity of their societies by training managers, and these managers formed a coterie that was one of these elites. And that led to resentment. But where did Robert Michel end up? Because he started off as a socialist party adjacent, kind of anarchist kind of type in Germany, and went to Italy. He was messing around with the Italian elite school. He ended up endorsing Mussolini as a way out of this bureaucracy. So the way that he saw to break the bureaucracy was to take a Caesarist figure, and with that Caesarist figure, manifest the will of the nation, which he saw as an integrated whole, and break up all the other elites, which of course has one fatal flaw. You empower a set of counter elites who run these institutions, are to break them down and loot them for what they see fit. So you replace one form of bureaucracy with basically an authoritarian figure to simplify the complexity in some ways. And this causes the entire system to collapse. In fact, now that's not from Robert Michel, that's from history. All right. Look at what happened to Mussolini's Italy. It wasn't that they controlled all the oligarchs. They ended up empowering selective oligarchs who sided with them to maintain their projects and suppress the communists, and getting inventors that tied them into the further and further and further and further into the axis, where Mussolini wasn't necessarily always totally sympathetic to Hitler. And then you see it completely fall apart in a series of wars and in the removal of a lot of the competent people who could actually make things run. Now, you can also critique communism this way, but that was one of their critiques, is communists couldn't get past the need for bureaucratic apparatchiks, and that the way that communists had to control the apparatchiks was only violence. Now, this all seems very abstract from Trump, but the anger at the bureaucracy is real and legitimate. All right? I'm not saying it is not. But the consequences of breaking that bureaucracy up with nothing guaranteed to replace it other than apparatchiks who seem to come from the tech industry, which remember that Trump was hostile to his last administration? That's going to like scrape all these departments out and throw them into ways to funnel this money into things that Trump sees as more conducive to the administrative vision so far, which seems to be mostly AI projects and, frankly, what I consider to be most likely boondoggles. To second what Cuba says, there's also downstream effects. You go after the apparatchiks to make sure the money arrives, and all of a sudden Medicaid doesn't work in 50 states because all the portals are down. And that you already know that the court system, even if you assume the court system isn't corrupt or been replaced by Trump judges or this, that, and the other, because even the conservative judges don't always do what Trump says. I want people to very clearly know that. it's going to take years to process everything. Some things will happen quickly because states are suing immediately. That causes immediate action. Other things will happen so many years from now that you will have forgotten what we were even talking about. Now, at the same time period, they're not getting rid of all the elite. That's the other funny fucking thing. You're pretending that there's no business elites are tied into the system, that somehow these people are anti-bourgeois, are stand against the system in some meaningful way, but most of them are apparatchiks from elite families who are part of the very same system they were criticizing that they're now taking apart very cleanly and efficiently. Now, what does that also mean? Well, it means that a lot of left strategies that we've adopted that relies on the status quo has to come from the fact that the dismantling of the status quo has a cost. It will have a cost in lives. There's no way around that. And the other thing you have to look at is, do they have anything meaningful to replace it that isn't just, are you replacing one form of rent seekers who at least had some kind of view of civic society with another form of people who just want to get rich and get out? That isn't breaking up the bureaucracy. That's looting it and giving it over to people who already have power. So we have to ask ourselves this. Where is this happening from? And it's not like the GOP isn't emboldened. I live in a state right now where all of a sudden the GOP feels totally okay decertifying the right of all unions to do any collective bargaining, even when the local government wants to do it. Now, there's a lot of dead weight in union bureaucracy. A lot of it's awful. I'm not going to lie. Right? There's a lot of dead weight in these hoity-toity liberal elites. You know, there's a bureaucratic apparatus, a military academic apparatus that is basically a giant landlord that is supported by the federal government. However, this is not a dual power scenario for the average person where there's another institution that's been slowly building who can come in and replace it. So you're going to be left in chaos. And the metaphor is actually apt. They're going to strip the copper wiring out of the house, even though the house was not all that legitimately built in the first place, and no one's going to get shit. All right,
well,
I'm done.
Speaking of someone that's going to get all the shit, Ben Burgess.
He does get all the shit. That's actually.
Would you like to chime in here? You're muted.
Sure. One thing that's interesting is if you look at the rhetoric of the right and of a lot of Trump adjacent people right now, that like some of what Varda is saying is weirdly not far from their own conception of what they're doing, right? So I'm thinking here about even the sort of like, you know, weird edgelord pseudo-intellectual types. Just wrote something about Curtis Yarvin, who just got a big splashy interview in the New York Times, you know, because the current vice president of the United States has called him a friend and, you know, cited his writings sometimes, as have various other people who are big in Trump world. And if you read what somebody like him says, like there's really no pretense to being anti-elite in a fundamental way. I mean, there kind of is, because there's this like I think they get a lot of rhetorical juice out of like sounding or feeling anti-elite. But if you actually look at what they say, like they're very clear that these, you know, they have this, you know, and like JD Vance himself, right, has said a bunch of things like this, they're very clear that they have this worldview where you're just going to be ruled over by some sort of elite regardless. That's totally inescapable. And so the only question is whether you're being ruled by like a, good, virtuous, I don't know, based elite, or by like a bad, New York Times reading woke elite. And they really couldn't be more explicit about that, right? Like the Yarvin stuff about the cathedral can kind of sound like this funhouse mirror version of Noam Chomsky, and Edward Herman talking about the corporate media manufacturing consent for the status quo. But the difference is that, somebody like Chomsky ultimately, wants, wants a greater variety of perspectives to be allowed in, and, has these sort of very deep pro-democracy views that people should just be able to judge for themselves what's right. And, has really defended the free speech of some of his like most intense ideological enemies. Whereas, the sort of Yarvin types are very explicit that they're like, no, we just want to manufacture consent for our shit, right? Like, we don't think that the peasants are capable of figuring this stuff out for themselves at all, right? Like, they obviously need to be ruled by somebody, right? So it's very, in some ways, the project is very, very explicitly, we want to purge the elites, to get them to ideologically align with us, and which overlaps with some of what Kuba and I wrote about before the election about Trump wanting to purge the deep state so he could weaponize it, and it also, like, if you look at some of what Trump has said, and I do take great comfort from how incompetent a lot of this has been. And that also gets some of what Varn was saying. And I think some of this comes out of this flood the zone strategy that Trump has had in the last week or so. That's like they're just trying to do so many things at once that nobody can keep track and nobody knows what to respond to. But like also that means that they're doing a bunch of stuff, kind of without like filling out the forms that you're supposed to, so it could just get thrown out right away.
Yeah.
Like you have all these laws, they're like, oh, you have to wait 60 days before you do this or that, and they're just ignoring that stuff, which makes it trivially easy to throw out. But I don't know. I mean, the thing that really hit me about this, I was like reading a description of the funding, pause, and like even some of the language used to describe it, was this stuff like, oh, we're gonna make sure, that all the funding gets frozen until we can like make sure that none of it's going to anything woke, right? Like that's the way they actually put it. And it's like, man, it's I guess Ron DeSantis won that primary after all, because I remember during the Republican primary, Trump making fun of him for constantly calling things woke and saying like, I don't even know what that means. And
isn't that this whole thing? Like we're gonna put this freeze on all this federal loan money because we have to make sure you're not doing DEI initiatives.
Yeah, right. And I think I see Paul Prescott in the chat talking about collective bargaining agreements. And it's like, I think that really, probably gets to outside of like the true believing weirdos, of whom there are plenty in and around the Trump administration. I think that at least gets to what's like really at stake for a lot of these people, right? It's like, well, it's just like completely ruin, the bargaining power of these federal workers. And, also like, again, as part of the flood the zone fuckery, one of the things that Trump just did that I think a lot of people are just sort of registering is another example of, oh, he's like going after some agency that libs like, and they're, making little procedural, whining noises about it, is he just illegally fired one of the members of the National Labor Relations Board. Law is like very clear that you're not allowed to do this, that, you can only remove them with cause and you have to wait and blah, blah, blah. Right. Which, again, I think kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but I mean, that's really part of the, I mean, but it takes it down to like the NLRB doesn't have a quorum anymore, and and stuff that might have gone through them can go straight to the courts now, which takes place in the context of a bunch of oligarchs, including, Trump BFF at the moment until they have a falling out in 6 months, Elon Musk, are trying to challenge the constitutionality of the NLRB. I mean, like, so it is part of this, like, actually really ambitious effort to, undo the New Deal.
What do you say to people that have, let's call them leftists, that are not fans of the NLRB? It's got a history. We all admit it's got a history. And they think maybe the dismantling of it under this administration may be a good thing. What say you to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the track record of this theory sucks. That, if things just get enough better, then everybody's going to draw, the working class will all draw the conclusions from it that we want them to draw, and it's actually going to work out well for us. It's, like we're doing some complicated pool shot, and it never seems to work out that way, I've got to say, in practice, or certainly not predictably enough that it makes any sense to think of this as a strategy, right? And so I would gently suggest, or maybe not so gently, because I think some of the people you're talking about really suck, that if you're cheering on the destruction of the last bit of organization or structural power that the American working class has, on the assumption that you're playing 12-dimensional chess and it's ultimately, is ultimately going to lead to some sort of socialist revival, it doesn't strike me that you're being helpful.
Gotcha. Why do you guys, do you think this approach resonates with people, or do you think Trump is risking alienating a certain sector of his base with this first kind of rollout of his shock and awe agenda?
Who's his fucking base? Like, we know that 51% of the voting electorate voted for him, right? We know that a lot of those people actually had profound negatives. We know that a lot of what he said he was going to do does not poll well. Does it matter? Does it matter?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
It matters in the sense of kind of what I wrote about earlier when we were talking about this, that people don't like it, right? You get mad at the nothing burger that is the status quo administration for 4 years. Then you want something to shake it up. This comes in and shakes it up. You don't like it when it gets shaken up because you get kids in cages. Now we're getting crazy deportations. I was reading before the show started on NPR, I believe. They tried to snatch up some Native American people in a raid. And then, it's a one and done administration for him. Is it the last one? Don't know. But I do think it has repercussions down the road.
It could matter.
You get things, you get strict sanctuary laws like you have in Chicago during this Trump term. Some of that starts before, but they really got a lot of
supremacy clause, my friend.
Say again?
Supremacy clause.
Explain it.
The federal government enforcement of borders actually can trump local laws. And what you're setting up is these governments having to actually go toe to toe with federal agents in a real way.
Well, it's happening in Chicago right now. And they're turning them away.
They can do that for a little while.
Okay. I mean,
if they start coming back with actual warrants, they're going to have a hard time doing that without having a showdown. And we've already seen this showdown play out between the Democratic-run national government and the government of Texas a year ago. And who caved? The national government did. Now, the national government caved because they didn't want to deal with the Texas problem. But now you have the Texas people running the federal government. Who's going to cave? We already know for a fact that what is the Democratic Party actually focusing on right now? You know what they're focusing on? They get on, and I get it, I understand, but they get on and start talking about defunding the police. in this regard, and how Trump is a hypocrite about this. That's their natural inclination. So those areas are going to need money. Like Chicago will run out of money eventually. So I'm just like what's going to give? Are they going to be able to maintain that, pay to protect those people, and also maintain their social services that they're not necessarily getting the money for as soon as the federal courts decide if that freeze is going to stay or not? Like, I'm not saying it's hopeless, and I'm not saying these things don't matter, but relying on municipal laws against a federal government is, I mean, unless you think the country's going to completely break down, and if we want to go there, we can go there. But it seems like not really dealing with the implications of the supremacy clause and the fact that the federal government is an insurance company that murders people.
Okay, a couple of things. I think it matters the state level governments as well. Like, let's not lose sight of that. Like you said, Texas was able to make the federal government cave, and one of the most likely counter strategies to sort of Trumpian overreaching will be states' attorneys general from blue areas suing in federal court. And the problem there is that the Justice Department needs to play ball, right? It needs to at least go through the motions, right? Having a pro forma structure that looks legitimate. If you purge the entire Justice Department, and you've already stacked the judiciary, as Trump did in his previous term, then the people who decide whether or not something is illegal, decide whether or not something is constitutional, well, they're on the same team as the people who are trying to do this unconstitutional, illegal thing. There's no reason to trust them that they'll adjudicate it fairly. And I also don't think it needs to come to that, because Trump, by framing this as the deep state and then the federal bureaucracy, he's picking some low-hanging fruit. People have been shitting all over bureaucrats for so goddamn long. I remember that they were a punchline and an object of disgust in the 80s and 90s. Fat cat bureaucrats, or they were either spoiled, wasteful, lazy, or incompetent, perhaps all of the above. I think that there was a successful Gramscian delegitimization of this entire class as anti-populist, right? Snobby, but also incompetent. Also, they're taking your money. And I think that it will be a challenge to actually frame cuts in the federal workforce as something negative in a broadly populist way.
I agree with that. I mean, I'm just looking right now about the House Oversight Committee, which started in has called for hearings about the legality of sanctuary cities and sanctuary laws. And that hearing's going to happen on February 11th. Do we think the Democrats who admit, I mean, the Republicans only have 3 more Congress people in the House. They hold the majority by 3, which for the House is an incredibly low majority. Do we think do we see the Democrats as doing anything about it? The reason why I say that is on the authorization for some of these ICE raids, we saw the Senate fold with only 9 Democrats opposing it. And I want to point out how the Democrats message on this. They were attacking Bernie for being bad on immigration, and he's one of those only people who was in the 9. So I just, I also don't know that I trust the National Democratic Party either. They
to me is the more
rolling over
basic point, right? So, because I don't think necessarily supremacy clause, therefore, therefore the federal government's gonna succeed in like stomping all these local efforts. Because, look, to a great extent, that's not how it played out in the first Trump administration.
That's true.
Trump deported famously fewer people than Obama did, and not for lack of trying, right? Like he tried like crazy. But I think there are a few reasons why, he didn't wasn't able to run those numbers up. But I think a big part is that actually there was quite a bit of like state and local backlash, and lots of the sanctuary city stuff, etc. I think the bigger reason to worry that it won't play out that way this time is because the politics of the Democratic Party are different this time. I mean, remember how Kamala ran on immigration? I mean, it was there was just not the slightest effort to present like any kind of counter narrative. It was just, oh, look at me, I'm a prosecutor who went after cartels and human trafficking and blah blah blah. So you can trust me, you can trust me to be tough on the border, right? Like that doesn't exactly give us a lot of reason for confidence, that they're gonna stand up to Trump's efforts to do mass deportation.
I also don't. We have to think about what the red states are doing in their own states too, and we have to remind ourselves that right now, I think the GOP does control more states than the Democrats, even though the Democrats oversee more of the population. I'm not even sure they oversee more of the population, but I think they might because of the density in New York and California. We've seen red-ish movements in those two bastion areas. I don't know if they'll continue, and I don't know what it means. Like, I'm not here saying that Trump's going to set up a dictatorship tomorrow. I actually do think that's the kind of thing that causes a bourgeois coup. But what does it mean that everyone seems out to lunch? We've had 4 years. We've had 3 years of most of Project 2025 being available. And even I thought, and I'm going to admit I was wrong, that there was no way they would try to
accept your apology.
Right. They were going to try to blitzkrieg something that incoherent into policy. What we're seeing now is actually not even Project 2025. There's stuff that they're doing now that is more ambitious than anything in that document. There's also stuff they haven't done yet, like making all union, like private union laws federalized the way completely undoing the NCLB. But they could do that. There's a real possibility of that happening. The other thing is, we have been over relying on executive orders as a way to deal with lacks and holes in legislation. Going back to World War II, it really accelerated with Reagan and kept accelerating through Clinton and even more through Bush 2 and even more through Obama, to the point that basically almost most federal action by the time you get to the second Obama administration, the Biden administration, and now Trump, both Trump administrations, actually happens through executive fiat, which is why you've seen a lot of, radical liberals, for lack of a better term, try to defend the administrative state so thoroughly because they're like, oh, it's what's managing the apparatus of democracy. And in some ways they're right. But the problem with that is it's not, the administrative state is definitionally professionalized and thus not democratically super responsive. It is responsive to democracy, but slowly. And so when you totally dismantle that, however, replace it or like go in and do the stuff, which, by the way, I mean, we have to admit the stuff about going in and like gutting the administrative power is stuff that the president can theoretically do because of powers given to the president over the executive in the Constitution. But we have, as a society, also regularized a lot of that. But Trump's going after executive orders going all the way back to Lyndon Johnson, including things like the the order that makes the Civil Rights Act apply to federal employment.
Yeah, the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission order.
Yep, that's been undone. So go ahead.
Which is part of the flooding the zone that they, because it was sort of presented as, and like what it got mixed up with, I think in the heads of most observers, was the anti-DEI stuff, right? But it's like all kind of being done at once, right? So like all these people who have, DEI bullshit jobs that have only existed since 2020, and it's kind of okay, right? That we don't necessarily need that. That it's like, and actually are just being put on paid furlough anyway, right? Like, but that's like kind of the main event in the public spectacle of it, right? But it's like there's actually also stuff that's really chipping away at the original victories of the civil rights movement.
And I think that there's another rationale for this flood the zone strategy, and that is probing for weakness, right? The reality is that the transfer of personnel inside the federal bureaucracy has not taken place yet. You have fired all of these people, but there's still many federal employees that are essential. There's also the process of transferring the institutional knowledge of how things work, the procedures and contacts at the very least, to the new set of people. That hasn't happened yet. But there is a perception.
Even the Bolsheviks, couldn't win without a bunch of czarist generals. Like, there are people in any system who know how to work the system.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, exactly, precisely. And if you you don't know who's going to put up a fight, you do have at this current moment, it feels like the Republicans are a juggernaut. Trump his legitimacy is unquestionable. He's the new president. He's seeing how far he can go where there's softness and vulnerability inside the state apparatuses, like a class and an organization. There is a lot of dead weight inside the bureaucracy. Trump wants to score some victories, so I think that once a weakness is identified, the agenda will shift in that direction. I'm more frightened about the fact that I think this is his approach for foreign policy as well. But when you hit resistance inside the U.S. state apparatus, it's going to take the form of lawsuits, job action, regulatory complaints, maybe some guy in a suit telling you no. And maybe that person's backed by a more powerful interest group. But those are all manageable. When you hit resistance in foreign policy from a position as belligerent and maximalist as Donald Trump, right? Like, are you really going to lose a ship over Greenland?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you before we go, because we're hitting an hour. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to come on here and holler for a little bit, because everybody was pretty frustrated.
Well, I'm not done, and you got people in your audience that I'd love to take out.
What? Wow. Well, I can't tell whose audience it is, Derek, because both.
I know exactly who they are, even know where they live. So anyway,
the end of Jay and Silent Bob. Is going to fly around. Visit.
Do you think there's a move that the Trump Musk team wants to privatize a lot of these positions, and if so, in their efforts to streamline the bureaucracy, would it weaken government functions?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I think so. They're gonna privatize everything they possibly can, and see how much of it goes to Trump family people, or the companies with X in their name.
Cuba.
I think part of the point is to prevent it's going to be a little like building a ladder and then setting it on fire, burning the bridge behind you. Trump needs to transform the bureaucracy into something effective so that he can destroy the parts of it he doesn't like and just make sure that there's a heavy burden of oppression on everybody he disapproves of. Everything else, well, he's a billionaire. He'll just make private deals, right? Commercial deals, one-on-one, for the services he needs and the issues that he personally cares about. Everything else can go to hell, which is, a feature, not a bug of this overall meltdown of the federal bureaucracy.
Derek Varn.
This bureaucracy was going to crumble one way or the other. Actually, I don't want people to understand that I have pointed that out. And it's been my contention that some of this stuff was going to happen eventually anyway. What I am so angry about, however, is people pretending that they have a plan and how this is good and how they are now identifying themselves with these actors who do not give a shit about them, particularly people in even other countries who've now got somehow attached to U.S. politics. And I'm all about internationalism, but this is projection. And we do not hold people accountable for when they make predictions that do not happen, and we let them mock people who criticize that as somehow being Democrats, even though in no world am I a Democrat. What's going to happen is a lot of what we needed to build for over the past decade and a half has been squandered on trying to save something that we couldn't save. And now we have to deal with the repercussions of both that squandering and the fact that a lot of us apparently have great men theory of history and just hope that if we parasocially attach ourselves to a movement enough, it'll work out well for us through some magic of dialectics that you cannot explain. The reality is a whole lot of stuff is going to come home to roost. And the idea that even a country as well situated as the United States is just going to do well because it is democratically popular for things to happen because people are legitimately frustrated and have no real outlet of their own creation or to handle it, that's going to automatically lead to things going great, and we're just going to get rid of the dead rate of all the apparatchiks and bureaucrats and after Trump us. Is that what we're arguing? Is that really what we're arguing? Because the analogy, as much as I don't throw around the F word, is pretty apt.
All right. And on that cheery note,
I would just say, with regard to the F word, I think that something to think about is that, the more sort of bleak a vision we present of Trumpism just being totally effective and getting everything they want, that there is a danger that this ends up doing their work for them, right? Because a lot of, when it comes, for example, to deportations, right? When they don't actually have the capacity, to deport that many people, right? That they're banking on spreading fear of deportation and having that kind of do the job, right? Which is an example that I think stands in, for a lot of other things, right? That, I think that these people, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good that any of this is happening, right? You know, I don't believe in the 12-dimensional socialist case for invading Greenland. But in fact, I mean, I'm willing to be the guy who's a tremendous lib who will unabashedly say I think it's much worse that Donald Trump is president, you know, than if he weren't president, because that seems just obviously true to me. But I also think that, you know, these people are not that competent. They don't win everything, and I think that there's an extent to which, you know, in the effort not to minimize the badness of what's going on, we can end up sort of pumping them up and making them seem much more formidable than they really are, and effectively, you know, signal boosting their efforts to get everybody to give up and be afraid of them. And, you know, I would just also caution people not to do that.
Kuba, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think what Ben's talking about picks up a little on the idea that this is a probing attack. You're flooding the zone. You're trying to do everything because you want to locate the hard targets and you locate the soft opportunities. And the resources available for the right-wing Trumpist coalition are finite. They're great, but they're finite, and they're contingent on things like the coalition staying together. We've already seen some fractures. There are factional lines being drawn. Maybe that's something that will limit their effectiveness. Also, when they do hit obstacles like local communities, they effectively resist deportations. They, rather than escalate necessarily and create problems for themselves, right? There's going to be a brute political calculus at work. If you make the costs high enough politically, through bad press, publicity, counter-mobilization, then it's not that the badness will stop. They'll just find a weaker target. And as a result, right, not everything needs to be go their way. But it is a very dangerous time, because all of the crazy things from Trump first term, now there's a blueprint to achieve them.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you, Paul Prescott, for your comments. See you on the show next week. We're doing this show because Paul flaked.
We coming for you, nigga.
He didn't flake. He had a real union stuff to get to. So you guys all agreed to come on. I didn't know Daring Farm was going to come on and be so
I have real
unhappy.
union stuff to deal with too, honestly.
Then can we make some jokes in the champagne room and you calm down a little bit?
No.
Please?
No.
For me?
I'll come in. Okay, for you.
For me?
One thing I want to say, I don't want to sound against localism at all. In fact, if you're gonna do things, that's where you need to operate right now, as in your state, in your sphere of influence. What your parasocial connections, that stuff is only useful for like trying to figure out what's going on. A lot of this has been spectator politics, though. And while I actually do get Ben's thing about unfair mechanism and just feeling like you're going to get rolled over and tired. I'm also kind of tired of lying optimism, because there has been, for the past 5-6 years, this idea that the other side doesn't learn. They're just going to do the same things. That it doesn't matter, that nothing ever really changes. And yet we've seen stuff that hasn't happened in the last 48 hours that really hasn't been attempted in this kind of direct way, with this much going on in a long time. It doesn't mean it isn't defeatable, I don't think Trump's the end of the world. Whether or not people want to debate about the F word and what is or isn't the F word, I mean, these are nominal concepts. Do what you will with them. You can make whatever you want out of them. If you want to believe everything is fascist, that's okay, particularly when you're like a fascist philosopher in your name. I don't really care. But I think this idea that things will just go your way on their own, that the federal apparatus will just come out on top, or any of this, that things are just going to correct themselves, or some foreign power is going to fix it for you. That's what I want you to drop. It's not that you're powerless. You have power. But you have to realize where your power is at. And a lot of us don't. And maybe it's time we quit, just watching all this stuff for entertainment. And I say that at risk of my own fucking channel. Like, listen to all the stuff for entertainment and actually learning what's actually going on in your area, learning what these laws are, and pacing yourself so you don't burn out. Because the other thing is, a lot of the people that you would have saw 6, 7, 8 years ago are already burnt out. That's all what I want to live on. Then I'll make jokes. I don't, I'm angry, but I don't really care about the rest of it. You guys can call anything what you want to. I don't really care. Have a nice day.
We'll be going to the champagne room. And Derek, you will be joining us for a little bit.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'm not going to end on threatening your audience and not make jokes.
Okay. Well, it's fun when you're there. We invent new slurs. That's a plus. These are pluses, right? I have picked some of the best videos the internet has to offer to show you people. So it's going to be a good time. If you want to join us in this good time, if you want to see Derek Varn possibly turn that frown upside down, there's only one way.
To make fun of my humorlessness. Yeah.
It's like The Simpsons when Homer sees Ron Howard take his kids to the zoo. He's like, "Oh man, even famous celebrities go to the zoo like us." And he was like, "Well, it's a different zoo. They have animals you haven't heard of, right? This is in the champagne room, give me saying slurs, but not any of the
these are slurs. Only real TIR actually and Varn Vlog listeners, only real Varn Vlog and TIR listeners know those slurs that we won't even say on the main show because they're so. Let's just keep them for ourselves in the champagne room. I can send you the link, Derek and Ben, if you guys want to share it with your patrons. Do you guys want to do that?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you're a patron of Ben Burgess Give Them Argument, if you're a patron of Varn Vlog, if you are a part of Kuba's OnlyFans, he just files paperwork in his tidy whities. Then you too can join us. If you're not a patron yet, you can try it out. Patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. $3 a month, $30 for the year. Or if you're totally new, you can try it out for 7 days, see how it fits. And on that note, we are